What's up, Refuge people, and welcome to episode 3 of the Refuge Weekly. I hope all of you have been finding kind of interesting and creative ways to spend your time at home. For me, what I've been doing is I've been trying to find time to rewatch all of my old favorite movies. And there's one movie in particular that's always really struck me. It's been one of my favorite movies ever since I first saw it, but it really struck me this week because I think it has a lot to teach us about ourselves. And I think the thing it teaches us is actually something that every human being has in common. But instead of just telling you what movie it is, I want to see if you can guess it. Now, the first hint I'll give you is that it's extremely well known. You've definitely heard of this movie, but you might not have seen it because it's actually pretty old. It came out in the summer of 1975. And when it first came out, it broke just about every movie theater record there was. It was a massive summer blockbuster. But the most famous thing about this movie, the thing it's best known for, and the thing that is probably the most significant about it, is that it is widely considered to be one of the most absolutely terrifying movies of all time. It is widely considered to be one of the scariest movies ever made. In fact, it was so scary when it came out. It scared audiences so much that it actually changed the world a little bit. After this movie came out, therapists saw a massive spike in new clients. That means this movie was so scary that people actually swarmed to see therapists because they were so scared. Families canceled their vacations. Towns went bankrupt because they had no more business. There was a national survey done before this movie was released, and in that survey, it had people list the 10 things they were most afraid of. After the movie was released, they did the same survey again. People listed the 10 things they were most afraid of, but this time there was something new on that list, all because of this one movie. And so all that to say, this movie that I love, it's terrifying. The movie is Jaws. Now, if you've never seen Jaws, the plot is really, really simple. There's this beautiful, sunny vacation beach town where nothing bad ever happens. Until one summer, a gigantic killer shark shows up and starts to mercilessly devour swimmers. And so, a local detective gets a group of people together and they go to kill the shark. That's the entire plot of Jaws. There is no other movie that has inspired so much fear and terror in the hearts of people. Jaws is terrifying. And so here's my question for us today. What is it that makes Jaws so scary? Because yeah, there's newer horror movies. There's horror movies with better CGI, better actors, better props, better writing even. But Jaws is still scarier. The genius of Jaws is that it understands that there is something that every human being is afraid of, and it's the same thing. And I'll give you a hint. This great innate fear that we all share, it's not sharks. Now, when Jaws was first put into production, when they first started to work on it, the studio behind the movie hired a young up-and-coming director named Steven Spielberg to make the movie. And his job was really simple. You need to make a scary movie about a shark. And so Steven Spielberg did, I think, what anybody would do. He built a gigantic shark. And this thing, you guys, is terrifying. It is this giant robotic animatronic shark that looks extremely real. It's full of pistons and wires and levers and pulleys, and this thing looks and moves like a real shark. And so Steven Spielberg looked at this thing and said, this is our monster. This is our shark. There was just one problem. The first time they put the shark in the ocean, it electrocuted itself, sank to the bottom of the ocean floor, and it stayed there for days, completely destroying it. And so all of a sudden, Steven Spielberg had a massive problem. He had an extremely short timeline to make a scary movie about sharks, but he didn't have a shark. Spielberg had to really think on his feet, and he started thinking of all of these creative solutions, like, well, what if we could do this? What if we could do that? And then he had an idea. He had an idea that would eventually become the reason that Jaws is absolutely terrifying. What if we don't show people the shark? At least until pretty late in the movie. But what if, for most of the movie, you don't actually see the shark? And people kind of laughed at Spielberg. They're like, you can't make a shark attack movie without showing a shark. But what they found was this. When they filmed scenes where you couldn't actually see the shark, but all you saw were ripples and shadows and waves, and all you could hear was that ominous theme in the background, what they found was this. People weren't just scared, they were terrified. They made the decision to not show the shark until 1 hour and 21 minutes into the movie. You guys, the movie's only 2 hours long. And so when you watch Jaws, the experience you have is for the first 3/4 of the film, you are terrified of something that you can't see. And then when you finally see the shark, yeah, it's scary, but you realize something. The shark on the screen is nowhere near as scary as the shark in your imagination that you've created yourself. And that is what makes Jaws so scary. Because it's one thing to be afraid of something you can see, something you can picture, something you can understand. But it's another thing entirely to be afraid of something you can't see, to be afraid of something you can't picture, to be afraid of something that is uncertain, to be afraid of something that is unknown. And so that is the fear that Jaws taps into. Steven Spielberg, through a happy little accident, learned that humanity is ultimately absolutely terrified of the unknown. We're terrified of being uncertain, because when something is unknown, then you can't control it and you can't predict it. And so that is why Jaws is just so terrifying. It is scary to be faced with the unknown. It's scary to be faced with the uncontrollable. It's scary to be faced with the unpredictable. And I think that is what makes our current situation pretty difficult to deal with, pretty difficult to process. Because it would be one thing if we knew exactly how long the shelter in place would last. It would be one thing if we knew when we were all going back to school. It would be one thing if we knew what to expect in the coming weeks. But we don't, and that's scary. And it's okay to admit that that scares us. And if it doesn't scare you, then I'm willing to bet it at least stresses you out a little bit. Or it at least creates some anxiety in you. And the reason it does that is because every single one of us have a deep innate fear of the unknown. Because, just as in Jaws, when something is unknown, when something is unseen, then it's unpredictable, it's uncontrollable, and it's unmanageable, and we don't know what to do with it. And so, in uncertain, unknown circumstances like the one we are in right now, what does it look like to follow Jesus? What does it look like to have hope? What does it look like to fight anxiety, to fight stress, to fight fear? How do we actually do that? There's a verse in the Bible, and it says this: "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Because what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Now, I love this verse for so many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is that it really addresses our current situation right now. Because what this is saying is, as a Christian, as someone who follows Jesus, our hope is not based on what we see. Our hope is not based on what we can understand. Our hope is not based on our ability to understand and control our circumstances. Because that's why these kind of situations are so stressful, because all of a sudden we realize, I'm not in control. I'm not in control at all. And we hate being out of control. But here's the good news. For someone who follows Jesus, your hope and your joy and your strength and your confidence isn't based on you. It's not based on how well you understand your situation. It's not based on what you know about your situation. It's not based on what you see or what you can control. Your strength, your confidence, your joy, your hope all of it, it's all based on the person of Jesus, who does know all things, who does understand all things, and who deeply, fundamentally adores you. And so friends, this week, have an honest conversation with yourself. Start asking yourself, where do I find my hope? Where do I base my confidence? Am I putting more energy into fixating on the unknowns of my situation? Or am I putting more energy into trusting that God sees myself, He understands my situation, and He loves me? This situation, you guys, can be a huge opportunity for you to learn to look at God and say, hey, God, I don't understand my current situation. There are a lot of unknowns, and I'm afraid. But I recognize that you know me, you know my situation, and you are good and you love me. That's the good news, you guys. Not that we can understand our situation or understand why it's happening, how it's going to end. The good news is that there is a God who deeply loves you, and He is above this situation. And so this week, be thinking about those things. When you find yourself feeling anxious or stressed out or even afraid because of the uncertainty of our current season, just think about it. How can I, right now in this moment, fix my eyes not on what I can't control, but on a God who does see all things? How can I fix my eyes on the fact that God does know all things, He does understand all things, and He is good and He is for me? How can I make myself focus on that? And so we love you guys. Be thinking about those things this week, and we'll talk about all of this more in your small groups on Tuesday night on Zoom. We'll see you then.